LSU and Ole Miss are about to engage in portal warfare. I'll explain. Locked on LSU. Here we go.
You are Locked On LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Okay, let's get it. It is Locked On LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get great podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is by leaving your comments below. So thank you sincerely for that. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. If you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com and place your NFL live bets all season long. Got a jam-packed football episode to talk about, and I'm so glad you're here because, you know, it's one thing when we're talking about football during the season and what's happening on the field. It's really interesting in the offseason when you're talking about building a roster and what all goes into that. And that's where we find ourselves now. And based on a lot of the conversations I've had with folks around the Ole Miss program, and if you caught our previous episode, shout out to our everydayers, one thing that is abundantly clear to me through this process is that Ole Miss is not taking Lane Kiffin's defection well. Now, if you're an LSU fan, you can chuckle at that, and I don't blame you. But there's also a retaliatory component of this that could affect LSU. Let me explain what I mean by giving you an example first, unrelated, and then I'll circle back, okay? So go back to last Thanksgiving. Remember what happened. And I'm going to bring up Bryce Underwood, okay? So last year, Bryce Underwood committed to LSU for a solid year. He and his family had visited Baton Rouge, was in Baton Rouge in early November for the LSU-Alabama game on his own dime. Bryce Underwood was pot committed. And then Larry Ellison, the CEO of Oracle, drops a big old bag in Bryce Underwood's lap, and a week before signing day, he flips. And it's left LSU in a really tenuous spot, right? Not only were you not able to sign a quarterback for 25, none of the 26 prospects, elite prospects, were interested in LSU because none of them wanted to sit behind Underwood. So LSU missed high school quarterbacks in back-to-back classes as a result. And what did LSU do? Remember what happened? Underwood flips, and LSU's boosters got pissed off. Excuse the expression. They got pissed. So what did they do? They threw money at the problem. They all went, grabbed their checkbooks and said, what do you need? You had a really motivated booster base at that point. And all those boosters funded LSU's collective such that LSU could go out and buy the best transfer portal class in America. Right? LSU rated the number one portal class in the country. Why were they able to do that? Because a whole bunch of really motivated rich people who didn't like the fact that they were outbid, that the guy that they had committed flipped because some other rich guy stepped up and outbid them. They all got really motivated, funded that collective, and bought a $20 million roster for 2025. Now, that $20 million roster went 7-5. And a big part of that is an illustration of why the evaluation is so important, something we've talked about. But let's not lose sight here. LSU's boosters were ticked about a high school quarterback the week before signing day, flipping to a school in another conference. Okay? How do you think Ole Miss boosters feel today about their coach, who they had given full autonomy, gave him everything he needed. Roster, staff, all of it. Control over the thermostat in his hot yoga studio, all of it. And he leaves in the midst of the best season they've had in anybody's lifetime, 6 decades since Johnny Vaught was there, before a playoff run. And doesn't just leave, leaves for the rival they hate the most in their conference. And you can say whatever you want about Mississippi State, and that should be the one. Strap a bunch of Ole Miss people to a lie detector, inject them with truth serum, and they'll tell you they look down at Mississippi State and they think LSU is more, they're on par with LSU. That's their rival. Okay, whatever. I don't care. Fine. Point being, a whole bunch of rich LSU people were upset about a high school quarterback flipping to a school in another conference. What do you think Ole Miss's supporters think about their coach leaving them in the middle of the greatest season in 6 decades to go to their most bitter rival in conference? They're motivated. They're opening their checkbook. And I'm going to tell you, there are 3 ways that Ole Miss is committed to trying to wreck LSU. Number 1, they are going to target LSU players and Louisiana high school prospects. Undeniably. Austin Thomas, Frank Wilson, Kelvin Bolden, Pete Golding from Hammond. They are going to go after top-tier prospects in Louisiana with open checkbooks. If Pete Golding goes to the top boosters in Ole Miss and says, hey, there's a kid in Louisiana we got to get him away from Lane and LSU, what do you think those boosters are going to do? How much? They're ready to write a check. It's number 1. Number 2, retention. Not sure if you saw this, but on Thursday, it was announced that 4 Ole Miss key players announced they're returning for 2026. Centarian Perkins, who's the only 5-star Ole Miss signed in Lane Kiffin's tenure. Defensive tackle Will Eccles. Center Bryson Sanders. Defensive back Antonio Kite. Those 4 all announced, the school announced on Thursday. All 4 of them are returning. So they are committed to making sure that guys that Lane Kiffin may want at LSU don't follow. So they're going to these guys and being proactive and saying, hey, what's it going to take to keep you in Oxford? So a guy like Centarian Perkins or Will Eccles, maybe guys that could be targets to follow Lane Kiffin to Baton Rouge. Instead, Ole Miss was proactive, said, we'll pay you right now to keep you here. So targeting LSU guys in the portal and Louisiana guys in high school, retaining their current roster. And number 3 is driving up the price. You ever gone to an auction, a charity auction? I've emceed a million of these things over the course of my, and I enjoy doing it. It's a thing that you do to give your time and your talents to worthwhile organizations. But what you learn about the psyche, and the way you raise money is you try to get people competing over a prize. And so they end up paying more than they otherwise would. Like maybe in their mind, they know what that auction item is worth, but they get into a live bidding scenario with a bunch of people watching. They want to win. And now it's competitive. And the other part of that is you also have plants. I've been one where you go in this room and you realize I'm going to stand in the corner and find the person who's bidding and bid against them to try to drive up the price. I'm a plant. I think Ole Miss is a plant. I think there's a lot of players that Ole Miss may not have a great chance of landing, that they are going to drive up the price on LSU to try to weaken LSU by driving up the price, to say, okay, we're going to make you overpay for that player by competing financially. I'm going to tell you one to keep an eye on. It's Kewan Lacey. Kewan Lacey, the running back from Ole Miss, started his career at Missouri, transferred to Ole Miss. Now, a nice bit of money this year, but it was less than $500,000. I know I say that, and most people who you you do an honest day's work, you hear that and you roll your eyes. But also understand if you're talking about the guy it ran for 20 touchdowns and 1,300 yards this year in the Southeastern Conference, he's worth way more than that. But it was less than $500,000 that he got this year in Oxford. And, if he follows Kevin Smith to Baton Rouge, it's going to cost. And I've been told Ole Miss has pushed his number close to $2 million. Meaning if LSU is going to want to land Kwan Lacey, LSU is going to have to pay close to $2 million to get him away from Oxford. Now, you willing to pay that? I don't think a running back is worth $2 million in the rev share era. I'd rather Ole Miss have to overpay him than watch LSU overpay him. But what's LSU going to do? Is Lane Kiffin okay watching a guy like Kwan Lacey stay at Ole Miss when he'd love to have him in Baton Rouge? Don't know. And if he goes to LSU's boosters, decision makers, check writers, and says, we need this guy, are they willing to write the check? Maybe this year. But if you don't hit, maybe you're more hesitant next year. Point is, this is where Ole Miss is. What you thought about LSU and how LSU, and I was telling you this is what they did. What the Bryce Underwood flip meant for LSU financially a year ago, now remove high school quarterback and add SEC team, greatest season in 6 decades, coach you had given everything to, leaves before the playoff in the greatest season ever, and leaves for your most bitter rival. How motivated do you think those boosters are going to be? Going to be really motivated to try to wreck LSU in any way possible. It is going to be fascinating to watch this war of attrition play out. We'll be right here for you every single day on Locked on LSU, your team every day. The holidays always show up faster than we expect. And if you're still putting together gifts, last minute decor, or getting your home ready for guests, Wayfair has you covered. Whether you need a quick room refresh, new bedding, or those final seasonal touches, Wayfair makes it easy to get what you need fast. Wayfair truly is your one-stop shop for everything home, with decor, furniture, kitchen essentials, and gifts for every style and every budget, all delivered quickly and easily. Listen, it's so easy to shop by style. It helps you pick pieces that actually fit your home instead of guessing what may work. And the Wayfair items that you order will instantly refresh your space without a big project. We've done this over and over at our house, my wife and I. So get last-minute hosting essentials. Gift all your loved ones and decor to celebrate the holidays for way less. Head to wayfair.com right now to shop all things home. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. Today's show is also brought to you by FanDuel, where NFL Sundays move fast. One big play, suddenly, everything feels different. That's what makes live betting with FanDuel so exciting. You're not just watching the game, you're reacting to it in real time. With FanDuel, you can place bets as the action unfolds. Every drive, every momentum swing, every highlight moment. Live betting is best when the game starts to shift. Receiver gets hot, defense tightens up, momentum flips after a turnover, and FanDuel lets you jump into the moment. Live spreads and moments and money lines update and adjust instantly. Player props update as guys heat up, and you can bet next touchdown scores, drive results, totals. It keeps you locked into every snap, every drive, every possibility. So if you want to be right in the middle of the action this season, visit FanDuel.com. Place your NFL live bets all season long. FanDuel, the game moves fast, and so can you. Going to continue with LSU search for a defensive line coach in just a second, but I want to thank you for making Locked on LSU your first listen every day. And thank you for making Locked on the #1 sports podcast network. Now, you already live your team every day. Now, take it up a level and go ad-free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked on LSU with no interruptions, members-only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to the link in the show notes to learn more. Again, we appreciate you for hanging out with us here. There was an interesting tidbit from Pete Nakos for Vaughn 3 that Gerald Chatman had been pursued by LSU for the vacant defensive line coach job, only to remain at Florida. Now, let me give you a little bit of context if you're not familiar with Gerald Chatman. He is of the Pete Jenkins tree, defensive line tree, but Chatman, you might remember, was part of the very tumultuous 2023 for LSU defensively. So Gerald Chatman was an analyst for LSU. And remember, in the spring of 2023, during spring ball, LSU's defensive line coach left in the middle of spring. Jamar Cain left in the middle of spring for the Denver Broncos. So at that point, Brian Kelly promoted Gerald Chatman from analyst to defensive line coach. Now, Chatman wanted the full-time defensive line coach job, but Brian Kelly didn't hire him. Instead, they hired Jimmy Lindsey. Now, Chatman at that point left. He didn't want to be an analyst. Left for the defensive line coach job at Tulane. Now, you remember what happened at LSU. Jimmy Lindsey, unfortunately, had a pretty devastating medical condition befall him at the start of fall camp. And so Kelly promoted John Jancic to defensive line coach. And as that year defensively unfolded to be the worst in LSU history, they brought in Pete Jenkins as basically a consultant for on the defensive line to help with the defensive line. So after that season, Pete Jenkins retired again. The defensive staff was awful, so John Jancic was out with most of the defensive staff. And LSU brought in Bo Davis. And now Bo Davis, after one season, left. Kyle Williams was brought in, and now Kyle Williams, after one season, is gone. So it's been remarkable, the amount of turnover at defensive line coach for LSU, starting with Brian Kelly's era, even before that, when Bill Johnson retired after being on Ogeron's staff. But, this year Lane Kiffin came in understanding Kyle Williams was not going to coach anymore and looking for the replacement. Now, Elijah Robinson was the guy that looked like he was going to get the job. Robinson, great recruiter, had been a really good defensive line coach at Texas A&M. Prior to that, he was at Temple and Baylor under Matt Rule. And he left to go 2 years ago to go be the defensive coordinator at Syracuse. Well, it didn't work out. He was demoted at Syracuse. And then it looked like he was going to take the LSU job. As a matter of fact, Football Scoop reported it, that he had accepted the job to be LSU's defensive line coach. Football Scoop got it wrong because that clearly didn't happen, as Robinson then entertained overtures from Nebraska and the aforementioned Matt Rule. And then Penn State, his alma mater, where he played collegiately. So effectively, if they were still interested in Elijah Robinson, while Robinson hasn't declared or accepted publicly a job anywhere, if they were still after Robinson, I don't think they would have been pursuing Gerald Chatman. Also, a lot of people ask about Ed Ogeron. Remember, Ogeron is available. He's not working for anybody right now. So if they wanted to hire Ed Ogeron, they could have done it already, which tells you they're not interested in hiring Ed Ogeron, because if they wanted to, they would have done it. Which really leaves, the Chatman thing is interesting because it does tell you they were looking outside of the current circle. But inside of the current circle, the most obvious answer would be Chris Kiffin. So Chris Kiffin is Lane's brother. He spent the last 2 years as an analyst at Ole Miss. in his career. He's got 11 years working with defensive line, both at college and the NFL. He has SEC experience during his time at Ole Miss, both as a grad assistant in 2007 and as a defensive line coach from 2012 to 2016. He's also worked at USC, Arizona State, FAU, the San Francisco 49ers, the Cleveland Browns, the Houston Texans, and then the last 2 years at Ole Miss before joining his brother in Baton Rouge. So I think there are far worse options than promoting Chris Kiffin internally to coach the interior defensive line. I'll tell you one other thing I have been told has been discussed is potentially Blake Baker moving in coaching the Stars and Chris Kiffin coaching the linebackers. Well, I can't imagine a world where Blake Baker isn't coaching LSU's defensive linebackers, but maybe that's a consideration. It still stands to reason the most obvious choice would be let Chris Kiffin coach defensive tackles if that's where it lands. So as that develops, we'll let you know, but Gerald Chatman passing on the opportunity to return to LSU. Now, we'll wrap up when we come back with an historic honor for Mansour Delane. Don't you move. Locked in LSU, your team every day. Ever feel like your money just disappears each month? It happens fast. A few subscriptions here, an impulse buy there. Suddenly, the numbers in your bank account don't match the numbers in your head. Rocket Money helps you get clarity, track every dollar, and stay in control of your finances because managing your money shouldn't feel like a second job. Rocket Money does the heavy lifting for you so you can save more and stress less. Rocket Money finds subscriptions that you forget you were paying for, and it helps you clean them up quickly. Seeing all your spending on one dashboard makes it easier to understand where all of your money is going. And I like how Rocket Money automatically builds budgets based on past spending. It keeps you on track without overthinking it. So take control of your finances. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/locked on today. That's rocketmoney.com/locked on. rocketmoney.com/locked on. Before we wrap, I want to give a sincere hat tip to Mansour Delane. Throughout the course of this week, if you're an everydayer, shout out, you've been here with us. We've chronicled the honors that Delane has received. Now, a week ago, it was disappointing that he didn't win the Thorpe Award. That was probably to be expected because if we're being honest, these national awards are a popularity contest. A lot of the voters side for people with name recognition. So Caleb Downs, who was a freshman All-American 2 years ago at Alabama, won a national championship a year ago at Ohio State, now as a junior. Of course, he had the name recognition. Mansour Delane a year ago was a third-team All-ACC cornerback. He comes to LSU. He develops under Corey Raymond. He allowed 2 first-down receptions all season. Let me say that again. Mansour Delane allowed 2 first downs all season. Not touchdowns, 2 first downs all season. Incredible. Should have won the Thorpe, but I understand. Grant Delpit was the best defensive back in the country in 2018. Didn't win it because nobody knew Grant Delpit was in 2018. Despite injuries, he won it in 2019 when he probably didn't deserve it because he had a lesser year than he did in 2018. So strikes and gutters. But Mansour Delane on Thursday was named a first-team All-American by the Football Writers Association of America, which means the 5 recognized organizations that honor All-Americans: the Associated Press, the Sporting News, Walter Camp, Football Writers Association of America, American Football Coaches Association. All 5 named Mansour Delane a first-team All-American, which means Mansour Delane is a unanimous All-American. I want to give you some context. In the history of LSU football, which dates back to 1893, Mansour Delane is just the 13th LSU football player in the history of the program. Not 13th defensive back, not 13th defensive player, not 13th since 2000, 13th ever to receive unanimous All-America honors. Gaynell Tinsley in 1936. Billy Cannon did it twice, 58, 59. Roy Winston in 61, Jerry Stovall in 62. 25 years later, in 1987, Nacho Albergamo was unanimous All-American. And then 20 years after that, Glenn Dorsey did it in 07. Patrick Peterson, Mo Claiborne back-to-back in 2010, 2011. And then Grant Delpit in 2018. Burrow and Chase in 2019. Malik Neighbors in 2023. So understand, Jaden Daniels won the Heisman in 2023, wasn't a unanimous All-American. Tyrann Mathieu was not a unanimous All-American. As absurd as that sounds, it illustrates how special this year was for Monsieur Delane. So congrats to Monsieur Delane on one of the greatest individual seasons, literally, in LSU football history. Can't wait to see who's next. Hey, thanks so much for tuning in to Locked On LSU today. So make sure you subscribe and follow Locked On LSU so you get all the latest episodes. If you need a last-minute holiday gift or someone keeps asking what you want, make it easy. Ask for the Everydayer Club. Ad-free episodes of this show, exclusive Discord server access, and so much more. Subscriptions can be gifted through the link in the description. So for those of you on video, we're going to send you over to 24/7 National Locked On Podcast Network YouTube channel. On audio, make sure your second listen is Locked On College Football. And thanks for making us your first listen every single day. Until next time, it is Locked On LSU, your team every day.